9 years ago, a seasoned hiker walked into the Great Smoky Mountains and vanished without a trace. No campsite, no footprints, not even a broken twig, until nearly a decade later when his remains were found, neatly arranged in the branches of a towering spruce tree. What investigators uncovered next would challenge everything we thought we knew about the wilderness, and leave even veteran rescuers shaken. Before we dive into this chilling case, tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. And if you're fascinated by stories like this one, make sure to subscribe so you never miss what's coming next. Stories often begin the same way, but this one ends in a way no one could have imagined. It's about a man who stepped into the forest one quiet evening and never returned. His name was Logan Mills. But here's the twist. Nearly a decade later, he was found. Not at the bottom of a ravine, not hidden in some remote cave, but high in the branches of a towering tree, his remains arranged with eerie precision. And strangely enough, that was the least disturbing part of what investigators discovered nearby. What followed would leave seasoned professionals shaken, and the official report riddled with carefully worded half-truths. Our story begins in September of 2015. Logan Mills, a 30-year-old from Charlotte, North Carolina, wasn't a thrill-seeking daredevil or a mountaineer chasing glory. He was a nature lover, a careful wanderer, and the quiet voice behind a modest blog called Quiet Trails. His writing wasn't famous, but it resonated with a small circle of loyal readers. He shared advice on gear, trails, and the small details that made a night under the stars feel like an escape from the world. He was meticulous, thoughtful, and always prepared, traits that make his disappearance all the more unsettling. On September 6th, Logan set out on a solo hike into the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, a vast wilderness straddling the border of Tennessee and North Carolina. This is a land both breathtaking and unforgiving, where beauty often conceals danger. His plan was simple: drive to the trailhead, hike along the Appalachian Trail, then slip onto a quieter path to spend the night in solitude. Before setting out, he promised his sister Anna he would check in by morning. That message never arrived. The last sign of him came on the evening of September 2nd, around 7 o'clock, when Logan snapped a photo from his tent. The image showed the dusky wall of fir trees rising against the night sky. He uploaded it to his blog with a short caption: "Home for tonight." The night promises to be quiet. It would be his final post. At first, Anna wasn't alarmed when she didn't hear from him. Mountain cell service is unreliable, and Logan often disappeared off the grid for a day or two. But by the following evening, when calls went unanswered and his phone remained out of range, her worry hardened into fear. On September 4th, nearly 2 days after his last message, Anna contacted the park's rescue service. Search teams mobilized immediately. Logan's gray Subaru was found parked neatly at the trailhead, untouched. Inside were his wallet, cash, and credit cards, items he always left behind out of habit when heading into the woods. This confirmed one thing: Logan had entered the forest as planned. But where had he gone? The search was led by Dwight Farrow, a veteran ranger with over 20 years of experience in Smoky Mountain rescues. Later, he would admit to local reporters that this was one of the strangest cases of his career. For hours, rangers and volunteers scoured the main trail, calling Logan's name, sweeping with thermal imaging cameras, even deploying a helicopter. Nothing. Not a single sign of human presence. This was no ordinary hiker. Logan weighed about 175 pounds, carrying a pack of 30 to 40 pounds of gear. A man like that leaves a trail: footprints, bent branches, broken brush. Yet the mountains yielded nothing. Rescuers searched ridgelines, ravines, and the dense rhododendron thickets that swallow paths whole. They expected at least a tent or a discarded backpack, but they found none. No footprints, no broken twigs, no camp, nothing. That absence became the most haunting clue of all. In most disappearances, when a hiker strays off the path or suffers an accident, their equipment is the last thing they part with. A tent is shelter. A backpack carries food, water, and first aid. Lifelines no one willingly abandons. But in the case of Logan Mills, all of it had vanished, as though man and gear alike had been swallowed whole by the wilderness. For 10 relentless days, search teams scoured the Great Smoky Mountains, expanding their sweep across dozens of square miles. Volunteers who had followed Logan's blog traveled from across the country, determined to bring him home. Yet every trail ended in silence. After 10 days, the official search was suspended, and the familiar explanation was given to the press. The hiker likely strayed from the path, fell victim to the terrain, or succumbed to the weather. The internal reports, however, stripped of public polish, admitted the truth. No trace, no clue, no answer. Logan had simply disappeared. Years passed, and his name faded into the long list of Smoky Mountain legends. For his family, the pain never dulled. Every September, Anna Mills would return to the trailhead, where her brother's car was found, and place fresh flowers, whispering promises into the mountain air. She refused to believe that a man as meticulous and cautious as Logan had simply gotten lost. Then, in July of 2024, 9 long years later, an accident of chance broke the silence. A group of cavers from Knoxville, Tennessee, was exploring rugged sinkholes and hidden caverns nearly 5 miles from Logan's last known camp. The terrain there was unforgiving. Jagged cliffs, dense thickets, and slopes so steep that only ropes and climbing gear made passage possible. As Mark Caldwell, one of the cavers, rappelled down a cliffside, his eyes caught something unusual in the crown of a massive spruce, clinging to the edge of the precipice. At first, he thought it was an enormous bird's nest, but the shape was wrong, too rigid, too geometric. He called to his partner, and together they climbed up the trunk. What they found froze them in place. Perched on a wide fork nearly 30 feet above the ground were human remains, but not scattered by weather or wild animals. The skeleton had been deliberately dismantled and arranged like a chilling display. The spine was laid out in a straight line, ribs aligned carefully on either side, forming a cage, and resting atop them like a crown was the skull. The long bones of the arms and legs were placed parallel, symmetrical, as if someone had built a macabre monument. A police officer later described it as a gruesome installation. This was no act of nature. Beside the remains sat 2 objects, a folding knife with its blade half open, and a length of nylon cord, later identified as part of a tent guideline. The very tent that had never been recovered during the initial search. Dental records quickly confirmed the impossible. After 9 years, Logan Mills had been found. The revelation made headlines, but the strangeness had only begun. When forensic teams examined the site more closely, they turned their attention to a neighboring tree just a few feet away. Its trunk bore deep indentations, between 6 and 12 feet off the ground. Rangers knew the marks of black bears well, parallel scratches from climbing claws, but these were something else entirely. The dents came in clusters of 3 and 4, as if some massive hand had gripped the trunk and squeezed with unimaginable force. At the center of each depression were punctures, sharp enough to pierce the bark clean through. Lab analysis later confirmed the impossible. The pressure had been so extreme, it crushed the wood's inner fibers. A biomechanics expert, speaking off the record, concluded that the strength required was many times that of a human and inconsistent with any known predator in North America. Whatever had touched that tree was powerful, deliberate, and unlike anything investigators had ever seen. The Sevier County Police Department, responsible for the jurisdiction where Logan's remains were discovered, had little to say. To every journalist's question, their answer was the same. The investigation was ongoing, and no details could be released. But silence rarely holds in small communities. Leaks began to trickle out. One anonymous source from inside the sheriff's office told a local reporter that the mood among investigators was grim. No one truly understood what they were up against. The possibility of human involvement was raised. Perhaps a serial killer who had staged Logan's remains like some macabre ritual display. Yet that theory quickly unraveled. Hauling a grown man's body nearly 30 feet up a spruce tree would have required a winch, ropes, or multiple people working in tandem. But the ground beneath the tree, thickly carpeted in years of pine needles, showed nothing. No footprints, no drag marks, no discarded equipment. It was as though the skeleton had been lifted into place by an invisible hand. Months later, the official report was released. It was the definition of bureaucratic caution. Logan Mills' death was the result of complex, unidentified circumstances. Natural causes and animal involvement could not be ruled out. Not a word was written about the claw-like marks embedded deep in the neighboring tree. Soon after, the case was quietly filed away into the archives, stripped of priority, as if the authorities themselves were eager to forget. But how could anyone forget? A skeleton arranged like a museum exhibit in the branches of a tree. What kind of power could scar living wood with force beyond any known predator? Logan's camera and his ever-present trail diary, two items that might have revealed what he saw in those final hours, were never recovered. Perhaps in his last moments, Logan documented something no human was ever meant to witness, something that stalks the most shadowed corners of the Appalachian Mountains. Something not only strong enough to kill him, but deliberate enough to transform his remains into a chilling message. And so, to understand what truly happened to Logan Mills, we must return to where his journey began in September of 2015. The search teams, focused on standard procedures, combed the terrain for footprints, campsites, and broken branches. They were not trained to search for the impossible, and so the details that didn't fit were left to fade. Yet thanks to Anna Mills' relentless determination, fragments of truth began to surface. Refusing to accept the official narrative, Anna hired a private investigator, a former police officer hardened by years of difficult cases. Together they re-interviewed hikers, campers, and anyone who had crossed paths with the mountains that week. The evidence they gathered wasn't a smoking gun, but scattered threads of a far darker tapestry. The first thread lay hidden in plain sight, in Logan's final photograph. At a glance, it seemed ordinary, twilight shadows, a wall of fir trees pressing in on his campsite. But when an image analysis expert studied the picture years later, something emerged that no one had noticed before. Between two trunks, barely visible in the fading light, a silhouette lingered. At the time, in 2015, it was dismissed as pareidolia, just shadows playing tricks on the eyes. But modern software stripped away the blur. The shape grew clearer, a towering, upright figure, too tall and narrow to be a bear, too solid to be a deer. Most unsettling of all, it was motionless, not passing by, not turning away, but standing there, watching. The image expert couldn't state with certainty what appeared in Logan's final photo, but his report carried an unsettling note. The object shows characteristics of an anthropomorphic silhouette, yet its proportions and stillness in low light make any definitive conclusion impossible. That single line pushed Anna and her investigator to dig further. Their persistence led them to an elderly couple, the Hendersons, who had walked the same trail on September 2nd, just hours before Logan pitched his tent. Their testimony had been brushed aside years earlier, dismissed as irrelevant. Yet what they described was anything but ordinary. As they approached a mile from Klingman's Dome's parking lot, the Hendersons heard a sound that froze them in their tracks. They knew the forest well, but this was nothing they could identify. Not a bear's guttural roar, not a coyote's wail, not the shrill cry of a lynx. Mr. Henderson likened it to a hollow, resonant thud, like a massive stone striking wood, repeating 3 times at precise intervals. Then, as if on cue, the forest itself went silent. Birds, insects, even the rustle of small creatures vanished. That unnatural quiet pressed so heavily on them that they abandoned their hike and turned back. The third piece of the puzzle came from a man whose family had called the Smokies home since the late 19th century. His name was Silas Blackwood, a solitary hunter and tracker living on the park's edge. Known for his reclusive nature and distrust of outsiders, Silas rarely spoke to authorities. Yet Anna managed to gain his trust. What he shared added an ominous layer to the mystery. He spoke of dead lowlands, patches of forest where undergrowth refused to grow, and wildlife never lingered. The ground there lay thick with ancient pine needles, untouched, as if nature itself avoided those places. 2 years before Logan vanished, Silas claimed he found tracks at the edge of one such lowland. They weren't bear prints. They were elongated with 3 forward toes and 1 opposing, like an oversized primate's hand. Each toe ended in claw marks. He snapped photos on his old phone, but the images were grainy, unconvincing. He never reported them, fearing ridicule, but when Anna's detective showed him photos of the claw-like impressions left in the tree near Logan's remains, Silas's expression darkened. He uttered only 3 words: "It's still here." And so, with these fragments, a reconstruction begins. Imagine the evening of September 2nd, 2015. Logan Mills sits at his campsite, the fading light slipping through the fir canopy. He photographs the view, unaware it will be his last blog entry. Then he hears it, the hollow thud echoing through the slopes, the same sound the Hendersons had described. A cautious man, yes, but also endlessly curious. Logan. I wouldn't have dismissed it. He likely stepped outside, camera in hand, scanning the trees. That's when he may have seen it. The silhouette, standing impossibly still between the trunks. For a moment, instinct and reason clashed inside him. Stay safe in the tent or follow the unknown. Curiosity, his constant companion, won. He didn't pack up camp. His tent, sleeping bag, and heavier gear remained behind. Instead, he grabbed only what he thought he'd need for a short detour. His camera, a flashlight, a bottle of water, perhaps a small day pack, and the folding knife he always carried. That's why no trace of his camp was ever discovered. Logan left it willingly, expecting to return within the hour. Guided by intrigue and perhaps the faint repetition of that haunting sound, he strayed from the safety of the trail. Step by step, he entered the dense, trackless forest, a place so thick and wild that searchers would never think to look. And somewhere in those shadows, what began as curiosity would shift into something far more terrifying. And here lies the chilling truth. Logan Mills realized too late that what he had followed wasn't some strange animal to be cataloged in his blog. It was something intelligent, deliberate, and cunning. It hadn't stumbled upon him. It had lured him, drawing him deeper into the dead lowlands that Silas Blackwood had spoken of. What began as a hunt for discovery turned into a deadly pursuit. For an hour, maybe two, Logan shifted from the role of hunter to hunted. The thrill of curiosity gave way to primal fear as he tried to retrace his steps, only to find the forest had swallowed the path behind him. Now the creature no longer hid. It stalked him openly. Logan ran, desperate, leaving no trace of his camp because he had left it behind himself. His footsteps vanished too, not because of the ground, but because something else moved with him, something that traveled differently, perhaps from tree to tree, or in ways the human eye and science have yet to understand. Eventually, his flight ended at the edge of a sheer cliff. Behind him, it closed in. In front of him, only an abyss. In desperation, Logan may have scrambled up the massive spruce clinging to the cliffside, hoping to find safety in height. But the claw marks on the neighboring tree told the rest of the story. The creature was a climber. It gripped the trunk with terrifying strength, crushing the wood as easily as brittle chalk, sealing off Logan's escape. We can only imagine those final moments. Did Logan raise his folding knife in a futile defense? Did he try to cut a piece of his tent rope attempting some desperate trap? We'll never know. The outcome was inevitable. He was killed there, in the tree. And yet what followed defies every law of predator and prey. A wild animal kills to feed. It consumes its victim or drags it away to a den. Leopards stash carcasses in branches. Yes, but no predator dismantles a skeleton with surgical precision, laying out ribs, spine, and skull in deliberate order. That was not instinct. That was ritual. Why would it do such a thing? Perhaps it was to erase evidence, letting time and decay take their course. Or maybe it was a trophy, a macabre monument to its victory. Or was this arrangement as natural to it as building dams is to beavers or weaving webs is to spiders? Whatever the reason, Logan's bones were reassembled with purpose, while his knife and rope lay discarded nearby, as if the creature considered them worthless scraps. But what of the missing diary and camera? Those were different. Those were human artifacts, objects of meaning. A being with intelligence enough to create such a display would surely understand the risk they carried. And so, it disposed of them, buried, destroyed, hidden where no one would ever find them. It cleaned the site like a predator sweeping its den. This reconstruction may be only theory, but it explains the details no official report dared connect. The missing campsite, the silhouette frozen in the photo, the hollow thuds echoing in the trees, the clawed impressions on the trunk, and above all, the grotesque order in which Logan's remains were displayed. Taken together, these pieces suggest not a random accident, but the presence of a creature that lives in these mountains, following laws of its own, powerful, intelligent, and wholly indifferent to human life. And perhaps the most terrifying thought is that Logan's story may not be an isolated tragedy. How many other missing hikers in the Appalachians vanished under similar circumstances, their bodies never recovered, their names lingering only on lists of the lost? What happens when another unwitting traveler stumbles into its territory? This question haunted Anna Mills and the investigator she had hired, Frank Jenkins. Jenkins was a man of logic, a skeptic who had spent his career chasing facts, not legends. He didn't believe in monsters. But what he uncovered in the Mills case rattled that conviction to its core and left him questioning whether every mystery has a rational explanation, or if some truths dwell forever in the dark. Frank Jenkins took on the work the police had long abandoned. He combed through decades of archives, digging into missing persons cases across the Great Smoky Mountains and the wider southern Appalachians. He wasn't just looking for vanishings. He was searching for a pattern, the same odd echoes that had haunted Logan's disappearance. He set clear criteria. First, The missing were always seasoned outdoorsmen or women, hunters, hikers, botanists, people who knew how to survive in the wild and wouldn't simply lose their way. Second, every disappearance carried the same eerie signature. No trace of camp, no equipment, no footprints. And third, buried in the reports were scattered hints. Strange sounds, unsettling sensations, fleeting observations that investigators had dismissed. The results chilled. Shim. Jenkins uncovered at least 4 cases in the past 20 years that mirrored Logan's in disturbing ways. Case 1. October of 1988. 45-year-old hunter Michael Perry vanished from his deer blind, a raised platform overlooking the forest. His rifle, fully loaded, leaned against the tree. A thermos of coffee, still warm, sat nearby. But Perry himself, his pack, and his radio were gone. Searchers combed the area, but no body was ever found. The official report mentioned a possible heart attack or a fall, yet off the record, one rescuer admitted the ground beneath the stand was suspiciously clear, no broken branches, no drag marks, as if the earth had been swept clean. Case 2. June of 2004. 22-year-old botany student Emily Carter vanished while collecting moss samples off-trail. She kept steady radio contact with her professor until her last message. She described a low, vibrating hum coming from beneath the ground. Then silence. Her pack, her journal, her equipment, all gone. No sign she'd ever been there. Case 3. September of 2009, 6 years before Logan's fate. A family of 4, parents and 2 teenage children, failed to return from a short camping trip. Rescuers found their tent still standing, their backpacks neatly packed, food untouched, water waiting. But the family was gone. Even stranger, all 4 pairs of boots had vanished. No signs of struggle, no predator tracks. Just silence. How could 4 people walk barefoot into the wilderness and never come back? Jenkins compiled his findings into a detailed report, and with Anna Mills at his side, presented it to park officials and the sheriff's office. He didn't mention monsters or myths. He spoke in terms of patterns, an unidentified threat moving according to a calculated, predatory design, erasing evidence with precision. But the reaction was as cold as the mountain air. Officials dismissed his theories, insisting he was linking accidents separated by years and miles. Resources were tight, they said. Speculation didn't justify action. Privately, one park manager told him bluntly, "Frank, even if you were right, what do you expect us to do? Shut down 2,000 square miles of parkland? Spark panic that could cripple the region's tourism industry? We can't afford that. It's easier to believe these people just got lost." It seemed like a dead end. But a week later, Jenkins's phone rang. The voice on the line identified himself as a former federal employee, someone who had dealt with incidents in protected wilderness areas. He spoke only under the promise of anonymity, and what he revealed would take the mystery of Logan Mills far beyond one man's disappearance. The anonymous voice on the line confirmed Frank Jenkins's darkest suspicions. Within certain government agencies, there existed an unspoken protocol for cases like that of Logan Mills, incidents filed under a chilling E designation, X factor. These were disappearances and deaths that defied standard explanations, carefully shelved away in official archives but tracked in secret databases. The caller claimed that, according to years of quiet data collection, officials knew of a rare, unclassified primate-like species inhabiting remote regions of North America, especially the Appalachians and the Pacific Northwest. This wasn't folklore, he insisted. It wasn't the snowman of legend. It was a real living creature that evolution had carved into a predator unlike anything else on Earth. According to the information, this species lived largely among the trees, explaining its ghostly silence and near invisibility in dense forests. Its physical strength was extraordinary, with grip power strong enough to crush wood fibers and climb vertical trunks with ease. It was omnivorous, but when it hunted, it did so with lethal efficiency. More alarming still, it possessed a kind of intelligence, not human, but advanced enough to understand patterns, threats, and territory. It knew that people posed danger, so it avoided contact unless noticed. When that happened, it acted swiftly. It removed witnesses and erased every trace, dismantling tents, destroying equipment, even hiding clothing. Why, then, had Logan's knife and rope been left behind? Perhaps the creature deemed them meaningless scraps, or perhaps they were intentionally left as part of something ritualistic. Because the way Logan's bones were arranged, the source explained, wasn't random. Analysts believed it to be a territorial marker, a message both to others of its kind and to any predator that might wander too close. This is my domain. This is my kill. That arrangement signaled not mere instinct, but symbolic thought, a capacity that blurred the line between animal behavior and something far more unsettling. And yet, the caller continued, this knowledge was kept from the public not out of cruelty, but calculation. Imagine the consequences. Mass hysteria, hunters with high-powered rifles swarming national parks, ecosystems collapsing, and far more deaths. It was easier, safer even, to let a few vanish every few years than to shatter the illusion of control, to admit that humanity was not the only apex presence in the wilderness. Anna Mills and Frank Jenkins were left with a terrifying truth, but no proof. No photographs, no recordings, no diary, no camera. Only patterns, testimonies, and Logan's remains arranged high in a tree. The case was formally closed. Logan's body was cremated, and the world moved on. Today, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park still welcomes millions of visitors each year. Families hike its trails, couples pose against panoramic overlooks, campers fall asleep beneath glittering stars. They walk the same paths Logan once walked, blissfully unaware that in certain pockets of forest, those dead lands, where undergrowth will not grow and silence presses too heavy, something may be watching. They hear the hollow tapping in the distance and think of woodpeckers, never imagining what else it could mean. And they never realize that the neatly stacked bones found in the crown of a spruce were not simply a gruesome curiosity. They were a reminder. Now, you've heard the story, too. The forest holds secrets far older, far darker than we dare to believe. And sometimes, when we step too far into its shadows, it reminds us, brutally, that the wild does not belong to us. Even today, families hike the same trails where Logan Mills once walked, never knowing what may linger in the dead lowlands of the Smoky Mountains. Was his death the work of an unclassified predator, or something stranger still marking its territory in ways beyond human comprehension? Logan's story reminds us that the wilderness is far older, far stronger, and far darker than we want to believe. But what do you think? Could this have been the first real glimpse of something science refuses to name? Or simply a mystery twisted by fear? Share your theories in the comments, and if you felt the chill of this story, don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next descent into the unknown.